Hello and welcome to another Fantasy Premier League video. My name's Steve and I sold both Salah and Son at the start of gameweek 21 in order to sell both of these players at their maximum sale price in order to have the best chance at buying them back at either an identical sale price or hopefully slightly cheaper. Now, unfortunately, one of those players that I did buy was Bowen, who has subsequently been injured in the stoppage time of the FA Cup match, forcing me into considering a -4 hit in order to sell him again in the same game week. Now, this move was all about value and at the very small risk of injury, which I've unfortunately been stung with. But not only have I been stung by the injury, it looks like the official FPL team are artificially propping up the prices of both Salah and Son. So I have contacted the official FPL team to try and get to the bottom of why they are manipulating the markets, and I will have a bit of a conversation to go over there. But there's quite a bit to get through in this video. But before we get started, if you like the following content, make sure to give the video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. Now, first of all, Richarlison owners should probably be a little bit more wary of what's going on with Richarlison, as Spurs have signed Timo Werner on a loan deal from Red Bull Leipzig. Now, the Red Bull Leipzig manager Marco Rose confirmed that the reason that Timo Werner was leaving was that he wasn't getting enough minutes and was going elsewhere to try and find some more game time ahead of Euro 2024. So part of Werner's negotiations with Postecoglou would have definitely been some sort of guarantee of starts once he's up to speed, learn Ange Ball, and of course has the match fitness. Now, this will undoubtedly directly affect Richarlison, maybe not in terms of minutes during the Asia Cup period while Son is over there playing, but probably in terms of positioning once Werner is introduced into the team. Now, Timo has only had 2 starts at Red Bull Leipzig. He's played 8 matches and a grand total of only 207 minutes so far this season. So he's not going to be coming over with a lot of match fitness. But he should be fit enough to start off the bench as soon as Postecoglou thinks he understands his system. Now, when Maddison and Son are back and Werner is up to speed, my guess is that we'll probably see a front line of either Werner or Richarlison up front, Son out on the left wing, Maddison in the cam position, and Kulusevski out at right wing. And with Richarlison still managing to miss some sitters, it's a bit of a tongue twister, if Werner is a little bit more clinical in front of goal, then we could see him get the nod over Richarlison. So Richarlison's starts may in fact be numbered. Now, with Son out of the team, I suspect what we will probably see is this week we'll probably see Richarlison up front, Kulu maybe in cam, Johnson out on the right, and maybe Brian Hill out at left wing, or maybe Solomon out at left wing, because I understand that he is probably back as well. But what we might also see is potentially Richarlison out at left wing and Timo Werner starting up front. Maybe not starting up front, but maybe moved into up front and Richarlison going out to the left wing. So Richarlison's positioning could well be affected by this. So I thought I'd go over that first, as Richarlison is a potential option for blow-in replacements, which I will be going through a little bit further along in the video. Now, the market manipulation frustrations. So both Salah and Son have each dropped by 0.1 million and have been hovering over a decrease for the past week, with the prediction sites reporting every single day that both players should have dropped in value again. Now, at the time of recording, Salah has already been sold by 1.9 million managers this game week, and Son has been sold by 1.58 million managers. Now that's 20% of the whole game for Salah and 15% of the whole game for Son, yet each player has only dropped in by 0.1 million across 12 days, where the price of each player can change by 0.1 million each day, according to the rules that have been posted on the official FPL site. I am without a doubt convinced that FPL is artificially propping up the prices of these players. So comparatively, Foden, who I brought in at the start of the game week as one of my transfers in, has been bought so far this game week by 770,000 managers, yet his value has increased by 0.2 million already. So 770,000 players buy Foden, he goes up by 0.2 million. 1.9 million managers, so almost 3 times the amount, sell Salah, and yet he's only dropped by 0.1 million. And Son by 1.58 million. Just things don't make sense. Now, in my opinion, this is actually terrible for the game for a few reasons. First of all, those of us who actually take the risk of making early transfers in order to moneyball our teams, and who get stung with those risks, like I have copped this week, are seemingly being punished because someone at official FPL thinks they need to prop up these prices for some arbitrary reason. Now, by doing this, they are actually trying to force us to play the game in a very specific way at the whims of whoever is in control of the pricing. And the way that they are the way that this forces us to play the game is to delay moves until the final moments in the game week, where the site has actually crashed in the past. Now, who knows how they decide to adjust the pricing? Whatever reasoning they're using seems to be different for different players and have different conditions depending on different periods of the season. Now, they have introduced a market into the game with player price fluctuations for a reason, and I actually think it's a great aspect of the game as opposed to having something like fixed player prices. But if you artificially muck around with the prices and provide absolutely no reasoning as to why this is happening, it reeks of incompetence, as we can only surmise that those reasons are incredibly arbitrary and made by someone in the team, as opposed to it being an actual market or driven by a software algorithm. So for context, Haaland has dropped down to 13.9 million from 14.0 million, which was his start price at the beginning of the game. Now, I can kind of understand some reasoning that might include factors that they probably don't want him to drop too far past his start price of 14.0 million. But given his massive ownership throughout the whole game up until the point he got injured, I have no idea why he hasn't increased in value over the course of the season, given the heavy investment. Now, my guess is that they have artificially slowed his price rises across the season, which again seems to be for some arbitrary reason. We can only guess as to what that might be. Now, had they just let his price rise naturally over the course of the season, then they could just as easily let him fall in price when he gets injured and sold by the masses. Now, for comparison, in the case of Salah and Son, both players have actually risen by 0.8 million and 0.9 million respectively from their start prices at the start of the season. So we have to ask the question, why are they artificially being held higher? Their prices, that is. One rule for one player and one rule for a completely different set of players just doesn't sit right with me. And so I took it upon myself to try and find out why. So I actually wrote to the official FPL team. This is what I wrote. So, g'day, I've noticed that Salah has been sold by 1.53 million managers this game week, and Son has been sold by 1.25 million managers, yet each of their prices have only dropped by 0.1 million each. Obviously, I sent this quite a few days ago. Can you comment on whether you are restricting these players from falling in price faster than what we would normally see? And if so, why are you doing this? It seems managers who sold early in the game week in order to bank the maximum sale prices of these players are not seeing the full value of taking on the risk of transferring early, given these player prices should have fallen further by now. Kind regards, Steve. So I got a response from the official FPL. It says, "Hi Stephen, thank you for getting in touch. Player prices can change daily during the season dependent on the popularity of the player in the transfer market. Once the season has started, player prices may change by £0.1 million a day based on activity in the transfer market. The price shown on your transfers page is a player's selling price." Now they've completely gone on a random tangent here. This selling price may be less than the player's current purchase price, as a sell-on fee of 50%, rounded down to the nearest 0.1 million, will be applied to any profits made on that player. Clearly, this is just a copy and paste job of a very common question that they get over at official FPL as to why the sale price of a player is not the same as the purchase price listed in the market. And then they go on to explain why there's a difference in between purchase and sale price. For example, if you buy a player for 8.3 million and when you transfer him his price is 9.0 million, his selling price will be 8.6 million. This rule is in place to prevent managers who have several players in their squads whose prices rise quickly from gaining an unfair advantage over competing managers. To see the purchase price, selling price, and current price of all the players, go to the Transfers tab and select the List View option. If you have any further FPL related questions, please let us know. Kind regards, I've omitted the name from the person who replied to me at the support team. So I responded back and said, "G'day, I've just received a reply that was not at all about what my question or subject was about. My query is about whether Son and Salah's purchase price has been restricted from falling too fast during the current game week, given that each player has been sold by 1.28 million and 1.57 million managers respectively in this current game week. Both players' purchase price, and in brackets, not the sale price, but the current listed buy price, have only dropped by 0.1 million each this game week. I know the rules state that players can change in value by 0.1 million per day based on activity in the transfer market, so considering the volume of sales for each of these players is between 12 and 15% of the entire player base in the game, and that we are 11 days into the game week, surely they should have dropped further than just 0.1 million in value by now." and then radio silence from the FPL team. So I've still received no response to the second email, and as you can see, I didn't even read my first email properly and responded with completely irrelevant information. So I have no idea what's going on at the official FPL support team. I don't even know if they can actually answer my question. So I guess we will just have to wait and see as to what is going on there. So, will I make early transfers in future, given the result of what has just happened? So getting stung by the Bowen injury is part of the risk that we take in making early transfers. And if I make enough early transfers over the course of a season, I will probably get stung once or twice. However, in not making early transfers and catching price rises, I would not be able to afford the team that I currently have. Well, maybe not currently have, because I am currently sitting with 13.8 million in the bank, which is enough to go Solanke up to Haaland, Bowen up to Salah, and Foden back up to Son, with probably a little bit of money spare to have a look at going Kulusevski up to Madison. But for context, some commenters on previous videos mentioned that they were a full 0.9 million off the wildcard team that I built in my video a couple of videos back. Now 0.9 million in game week 19 is a lot of value, and having those additional funds in my war chest means that I can build a much stronger team than my competitors out in the field. Now, market manipulations aside, if both Salah and Son had fallen by 0.2 million each, which they should have done, that would be a saving of 0.4 million having gone early. Plus, I've actually made 0.2 million of price rises on Foden by going early, so it's actually about a 0.6 million swing. Now, if I offered you an additional 1.2 million in terms of money in the bank at the start of the season over every other manager in the game, but at the cost of starting on -8 points versus everyone else starting on 0 points, would you take it? See, I would certainly take this offer, as I would have an extra 1.2 million in funds to use across 38 game weeks, which is 38 game weeks of chances to make back the -8 points with better players in my team. Now, mathematically, it actually means that I would only have to score an extra 0.21 points each week across 38 game weeks, using an additional 1.2 million in my war chest to achieve this. Now, for this specific move I've made in game week 21, I'm looking at a -4 points across the remaining 18 game weeks of the season for an additional 0.4 million of value in my team, which I'll be putting to work when Salah, Son, Haaland and KDB are all back playing 90 minutes. So although I will not be using these funds over the short term coming game weeks, and I have 13 million in the bank at the moment, when everyone is back fit and available, I will come out of this with a much stronger team. Now, this isn't actually entirely accurate, as I have oversimplified this a little bit here. It's not actually 18 game weeks. Now, for context, the -4, it is actually kind of broken down into, there'll be around about 17 game weeks, so not 18 game weeks, for when Haaland and KDB are back, assuming that they both come back in game week 22, and about 15 to 16 weeks for Salah and Son assuming they progress in their respective tournaments and aren't available until about game week 24 or 25. And there are a whole bunch of other things that you should probably consider, but hopefully you can see why I'm simplifying here, just for the ease of explanation. But I thought I should point out that there are quite a few factors in play. Now, hopefully Salah and Son actually do drop by a further 0.1 million today, which is around about now in New Zealand when the price changes are meant to occur. So hopefully I do come out of this quite a lot further ahead, roughly 0.6 million on everyone else who is still holding Salah and Son and waiting until the final moments of the game week to make their decisions. But we will have to wait and see if any players actually change in price today. But will being stung by Bowen dissuade me from going early in future? Well, no. Heading into these moves, I am well aware of the small risk of buying a player who might get injured, and that it might cost me 4 points if that does indeed happen. And although I haven't actually made early transfers every single week up to date, I am only getting stung by this for the first time in game week 21. So I've got a lot of extra value in my team across the first 20 game weeks of the season, and it's only really cost me a negative 4 points up till now. Now, my philosophy is that the expensive players in the game earn the most points, and so taking risks on value is important in order to own more of the best players in the game. Now again, this is why artificial manipulation of the markets is incredibly frustrating, as there is no rhyme or reason as to why this has happened. But I digress. So, what do we do with Bowen? So 760,000 managers have already bought Bowen into their teams this game week and are now faced with my current dilemma. Do we hold him and hope that he's only out for one game week, or do we take the hit on the chin? So Bowen went down with an injury in stoppage time of the FA Cup match against Bristol City and had to be helped off the pitch by the medical staff with an ankle injury. Now, thankfully, Bowen was walking off the pitch, so it's almost certainly not a fracture to the foot. And watching the replays, it looks like he's probably rolled his ankle when he collided with the Bristol City player. However, he could have just as easily done some sort of ligament damage. Now, West Ham don't actually play Sheffield United until Monday the 22nd of January, which is actually a full 2 weeks after he went down injured in the FA Cup tie. And if it is just a rolled ankle, he might be back fit and ready by then. However, we aren't actually going to get any press information about what's going on before the deadline. So, all we've got to go on is a journalist saying that he's seen that the scans didn't look positive for Bowen, and the most recent report coming out of the West Ham camp is that it might not be as bad as first thought, and that they're hoping that Bowen will only miss one Premier League match. Now, there's obviously this game week, which goes over 2 weekends in the Premier League. And then there is... Actually, I probably want this one. So, game week 21, 13th of January in New Zealand. And then the next Premier League game week isn't until game week... the next game week 22, isn't until the end of January. So there's actually quite a lot of calendar weeks in between the 2 game weeks. So maybe Bowen won't actually miss too much of the FPL important fixtures. But one match out is enough for me to sell him for a hit this game week, as I don't fancy playing one of my Newcastle defenders off the bench against Man City in a 4-4-2 formation, and there's actually no guarantee that Bowen will be back for game week 22. So I will be taking a hit to sell Bowen, even though I've just bought him in this game week, which is one of the natural conclusions of the risk I entered into going early on the move. So, Bowen replacements. Now, I obviously don't wish any injuries upon any players, but I'm actually quite stoked that Salah, Son and Bowen are all out of contention. Trent too, for that matter, as it will cause the template to significantly diverge, making for a much more exciting period of the game with much more intriguing conversations in the community. Now, there are actually a lot of replacements to consider for Bowen, Salah or Son, but just about every option has its drawbacks, and given the dynamic range of choices we have in front of us, each FPL option is likely to divide the community based on what type of manager you are. So, are you the zero risk tolerance kind of manager that hates taking hits and only looks at 90-minute men? Or are you a slightly more risky and happy to take rotation-prone punts for a couple of weeks in a time of the season where teams are somewhat depleted through absentees or injuries? Or are you an absolute madman who's on your 20th hit of the season with a team full of assets like Nkunku, Tony, and already had KDB in your team last week? So obviously the kind of manager that you are will largely dictate which of these following options you might want to consider. So first of all, we'll start at Liverpool. Jota, Diaz and Gakpo are all options, but are all serious rotation threats. Who actually knows who is going to be nailed on over the coming game weeks? Elliott also adds to the options, as he has played at right wing throughout the season when Salah has been moved into that striker role. And Elliott actually started at right wing in the EFL Cup match, being subbed off for Gakpo at the 56-minute mark. Now, Nunez was subbed on at the same time in that EFL Cup match for Gravenberch and went on to play in the striker position. Diaz stayed out on the left, Jota went out to the right, and Gakpo was subbed on into midfield to replace Gravenberch. Now, Liverpool were down 1-0 at this point of the game, and so Klopp was making attacking substitutions as he needed to overcome the deficit. Now, in this match, Jota was floating a lot more centrally, basically playing alongside Nunez, and it was Bradley, who is Trent's replacement, sitting in at right back, was coming up high and wide, producing balls in from the right-hand side of the pitch. Now, over the FA Cup and EFL Cup matches, Diaz is actually the only man who has played 180 minutes. Jota was subbed on in the FA Cup match, but played the full 90 a couple of days ago in the EFL Cup. Nunez played the full FA Cup match, which was the earlier game out of the two, but came on as a sub for the last 30 minutes in the EFL Cup match. So as you can see, it's all a bit of a minefield. Now, I think the main question that Klopp will be asking himself is, where are the goals going to come from with Salah out? Now, my money is on Diaz and Jota as the two most likely goal scorers in the team. Diaz probably being a little bit more assured of starts, but has had a very inconsistent season. whereas Jota is probably the more explosive option, but probably a little bit more prone to rotation. Now, Richarlison over at Spurs, as mentioned earlier in the video, has a small rotation threat with Werner now in the team. He could also be played out at left wing, which will take away a lot of the threat that is represented currently in his expected stats. But Richarlison is probably on penalties with Maddison still injured. Now, Maddison is still not even training with the team, but with only 2 game weeks available in January, I'm still not keen to triple up on Spurs and hurt my chances of getting Maddison back at the earliest chance. Plus, Richarlison is only a 60 to 70 minute man, and I don't really rate him as a finisher. So I'm kind of ruling Richarlison out for some team-specific reasons, but also for some shooting related reasons. Now, over at Brighton, Pascal Gross looks like he's nailed on and has been posting some pretty decent expected stats lately, and could be a decent shout, especially considering the fixtures. I'll just bring up my fixture ticker. So I've actually done a bit more work on the fixture ticker over the break that I took off from the YouTube content. So what I have chucked in now is the potential blanks that are upcoming for all of the teams. And I've actually slightly changed the advanced schedule view so that you can kind of bring in the international game weeks and take them out, just to show a little bit more information on screen. Now, I haven't yet been able to put in the potential double game weeks, as there should be a whole bunch of teams in here that will potentially double in various game weeks, like game week 25 and so on and so forth. I haven't had time to do that yet, but I have put in the potential doubles, so you can see that in game week 26 there will be a small blank with any of those teams that are still in the Europa League, which is West Ham, Brighton and Liverpool, and of course any of their opponents could also potentially blank in this game week. So these are all the black teams with a question mark next to them. Game week 29 is also going to be a big blank, which is dependent on the FA Cup. Now, Arsenal and Burnley are the only 2 teams who have been knocked out of the FA Cup match. But considering Arsenal played Chelsea and Chelsea is still in the FA Cup, and Burnley are playing Brentford and Brentford are still in the FA Cup, basically every team in game week 29 could potentially blank at this point. But that will obviously change as the 3rd round replays and the FA Cup 4th round matches are decided. But if we have a quick look at Brighton and Pascal Gross over the very short-term fixtures, they have Wolves at home, Luton away, Palace at home, Tottenham away, and Sheffield United away up until game week 25. And if I actually sort by a couple of game weeks, they are top of the ticker across the next 5 game weeks, even the next 6 game weeks, assuming they don't blank in game week 26. But very good set of short-term fixtures. However, they do potentially blank in game week 26, and I mean, there are going to be some other blanks coming up, with potentially Spurs blanking, Liverpool potentially blanking. I've actually got no Liverpool assets at the moment. Maybe Chelsea blanking as well. So you do need to keep an eye on how many players you are bringing in that are going to potentially blank in the future. But I don't think that would stop me for a short-term punt on someone in the Brighton side. So back to Pascal Gross. He is on most of the set pieces and looks to be second in line for penalties when João Pedro is not on the pitch. However, João Pedro looks like he is getting quite a lot more game time, and so I wouldn't really count Gross as a probable penalty taker. However, with Pascal Gross, I watched him miss an absolute sitter against West Ham last week, which afforded Areola his 11-point haul. Now, I'm still ruling over that a little bit, but also I haven't really sat down and watched Pascal Gross in great detail, and so I don't really know what I'd actually be buying into here. However, fixtures are good. He's nailed on set pieces. The expected stats look good, so he is a viable option. Over at Crystal Palace, we have Eze, who is back and has started the last 2 matches, is on all set pieces and penalties. And apart from having to play Arsenal this week, he has a decent run of fixtures from game week 22 onwards. Where is Crystal Palace here? They're probably quite far down, are they? Yeah, so Arsenal away, Sheffield United at home, great game. Brighton away, pretty good game from an attacking prospect. Chelsea at home, okay game for attacking prospect. And then Everton away over the next 5 game weeks. But they do play Arsenal this week, which is not ideal. Then across to Man City. I'm actually extremely happy to have brought Foden in early, and I still think he is one of the top candidates. Now, KDB did make his first appearance against Huddersfield in the FA Cup match, coming on for the last 30 minutes of the match. Now, interestingly, he was subbed on for Alvarez, and it was actually Foden that went to play up front, he wasn't even really playing as a false 9, he was actually kind of more the main striker at that point, which I would have thought maybe Foden would have got subbed off and they would have left Alvarez up there, so I'm not entirely sure what's going on there. And Foden actually scored his second goal of that match when he was playing in that striker position. However, it was actually from a set piece, which was a corner, so it's not really from him playing in striker, but he was playing up front. So if you don't own Foden, I still would be looking at him as one of the top candidate replacements. Obviously not for me, because I already have him in my team. But Foden does come with rotation threat with KDB now back. And of course, when Haaland comes back and Alvarez no longer starting in that striker position, that adds one more potential player that could play in the midfield, being Alvarez, when Haaland is back in the team. So there is rotation risk with Foden over the coming game weeks. Kevin De Bruyne is a bit of a punt, considering the length of time he's been out and the fact that he actually hasn't even started a match for City yet. Although I think he might actually get a start against Newcastle this weekend. Now, if he does start this match, I think he'll probably only get 60 minutes or so. And of course, there is no guarantee that he does start. If he is on the bench again, I suspect he will probably come on for about the last 20, 30 minutes. Maybe a random halftime substitution to give him the whole second half against Newcastle. Who knows? There is a lot of risk around Kevin De Bruyne. However, he is an absolutely quality footballer, and with Newcastle's main issues being that they are struggling in the middle of the park, especially against the counter, and Man City being full of quick, dynamic players in those positions, I can see Man City absolutely dominating in this fixture this weekend. Now, Newcastle have had a full week's rest since the FA Cup match, but I don't know if this is enough of a break for them to fix the fatigue that was clearly showing over the last few matches for Newcastle. But the Newcastle midfield will be put to the ultimate test by Man City this weekend. And if they are not at all recovered, they will definitely start to fatigue in this game, as Man City will probably dominate possession. Now, Newcastle have been consistently conceding in the late periods of their fixtures when the fatigue is really kicking in. So even if KDB makes another substitute appearance for the final 30 minutes of the game or so, he could actually still flourish against the tired legs of Newcastle, assuming that Newcastle still haven't actually recovered. Now, Man City have been lacking in the creativity department across this season when you compare it to previous seasons. And the fact that Pep put KDB straight into the cam position in his first game back, rather than playing him as a deeper lying playmaker, indicates that he is looking to use KDB to address the creativity issue. And of course, Kevin De Bruyne can bang goals from anywhere on the pitch and can obviously rack up the assists from any position on the pitch as well. I really rate Kevin De Bruyne as a footballer. So, the options I am considering, I think the zero risk managers out there, which seem to be quite a few of you, will probably end up bringing in either Richarlison, Eze, Gross, or Odegaard. Now, I ruled Odegaard out at the beginning of the game week. I'm not at all interested in doubling up on the Arsenal attack, given the way they are playing. In fact, actually, I saw Andy from Let's Talk FPL calling Odegaard a Bruno Fernandes without penalties, which I think is actually bang on. So I wouldn't really recommend Odegaard, but I think Richarlison, Eze, or Gross are probably all very fine assets to choose from for all of the very risk-averse managers out there. Now for me, I'm actually still deciding between Gross, Eze, Jota, and De Bruyne. So Kevin De Bruyne for a hopeful 60 minutes this week against Newcastle, followed by a much more probable 60 plus minutes against Burnley the following week, and a potential double coming up, is an extremely tempting punt to take, especially considering all the alternative options that I have gone through each have their own drawbacks. It might actually be the best time to take a punt on a typically outstanding player. Now, this could obviously massively backfire. He could just get benched for the whole game against Newcastle. There is no guarantee that he even makes it onto the pitch. He is coming back from injury, and the comments are that from both Pep and Kevin De Bruyne that they are very much going to be watching his minutes and working him back into the team. So I don't think he's actually going to play 90 minutes for very long. But everyone out there is actually considering Richarlison, who's actually only a 60 or 70 minute man. And I think KDB is a way better player than someone like Richarlison. Now, if I don't end up going for KDB, I'll probably land on either Pascal Gross for the fixtures and security of minutes, or maybe even Jota for the potential explosivity that he offers. But I still haven't actually landed at a decision. It will either be KDB, Gross, or Jota for me in this weekend for a hit. But that is it for today's video. So remember to like and subscribe and all that good stuff. And until next time, cheers.